Hello everyone, what is going on? Raven here, and today we're going to talk about the disappearance of the Beaumont children. Now, I'm just going to collectively refer to them as the Beaumont children, but their names are Jane, Grant, and Arna. Jane, I believe, was 9 years old. Arna was 7, and Grant was 4. Now, this was in the 1960s, where it was a different time in which kids were allowed to roam around unattended. They got to go on a bus, go somewhere else. People were not really all that concerned about abductions up until this point. So, the Beaumont children were 3 Australian siblings who disappeared from Glenelg Beach near Adelaide, South Australia, on January 26th, 1966, in a suspected abduction and murder case. Police investigations revealed that on the day of their disappearance, several witnesses had seen the 3 children on and near Glenelg Beach, the company of a tall man with fairish to light brown hair, thin face, suntan complexion, medium build, about in his mid-30s. Confirmed sightings of the children occurred at the Collie Reserve and at Wenzel's Cake Shop on Mosley Street, Glenelg. Despite numerous searches, neither the children nor their suspected companion were ever located. The case received worldwide attention and is credited with causing a change in Australian lifestyles, which I mentioned before, since parents began to believe that their children could no longer be presumed to be safe when unsupervised in public. Police and media speculation has linked the disappearances to the Adelaide Oval abductions of 1973, which we will get to that in another video. Interest in the case of the Beaumont siblings has continued for more than half a century. As of 2018, a $1 million reward was offered for information related to the case by the South Australian government. The 3 children, Jane, Arna, and Grant, lived with their parents, Jim Beaumont, a former serviceman and a taxi driver, and Nancy, the mom and dad. The dad's name was Grant as well, but we're going to call him Jim. The couple married in 1955 in December. The family resided at 109 Harding Street, Somerton Park, South Australia, a suburb of Adelaide. They lived not far from Glenelg Beach, a popular spot that the children often visited. It is very known that these kids would go there a lot, and we're going to get more into things. On January 25th, in the midst of a summer heat wave, it was supposed to be one of the warmest days of the year, the children got on a bus, went to the beach, and the dad Jim ended up going to a 3-day sales trip. So he was out of town when this happened. On the morning of January 26th, which was known as Australia Day, the children asked their mother if they could visit the beach again. As it was too hot to walk, they took a 5-minute or 3-kilometer, 1.9 mile bus journey from their home to the beach. They caught the bus at 8:45 a.m. and were expected to return home on the 12 noon bus. Now, the mom did give them some small amount of change for lunch and things like that. Nancy, their mother, became worried when they did not return on either the 12 o'clock or 2 o'clock p.m. buses. And it ended up being that she was so worried, Jim came home early from his trip. He immediately drove to the beach. He was unable to locate his children, so he returned, and he ended up going. He searched the streets, visited the friends' houses, called the kids' friends, seeing if they've seen them. And around 5:30 p.m., they went to the police station to report the disappearance. The police quickly organized a search of Glenelg Beach and adjacent areas, based on the assumption, which you should never assume, that the Beaumont children were nearby and had simply lost track of time. Although, side note, this was never really proven to be a thing, as Jane, the 9-year-old, the oldest, was said to be very responsible. She even helped take care of her younger siblings and was always on time any other time. The search then expanded to the sandhills, ocean, and nearby buildings, with the airport rail lines, and interstate roads being monitored as well, based on a fear of accident or kidnapped. They actually ended up draining a body of water just to see if they could try to find their bodies, because they originally were thinking that maybe the children drowned. Within 24 hours, the entire nation was aware of the case. Within 3 days, on January 29th, the Adelaide Sunday Mail led with the headline of "Sex Crime Now Feared," highlighting the rapidly evolving fear that the children had been abducted and murdered by an SA, sex offender, which I don't know why I said SA, but obviously SA would have happened, but murdered and abducted and hurt by a sex offender. Despite this, initial official reward was only £250. The Parawalonga boat haven was drained, which I was mentioning, on January 29th after a woman told police that she had spoken with 3 children who were similar in description of the Beaumont children near the haven at 7 p.m. on the day of the disappearance. Police cadets and members of the emergency operations group searched the area, but they found nothing. Police investigating the case found several witnesses who had seen the Beaumont children in Collie Reserve near Glenog Beach, in the company of a tall man with fair to light brown hair, a thin face, in his mid-30s. The man had a suntan complexion and a thin athletic build and was wearing swimming trunks. The children were playing near the water with him and appeared to be relaxed and enjoying themselves, like they knew who it was. The man also approached one of the witnesses asking if anyone had been near the children's belongings, as their money was quote-unquote missing. The man then went off to change while the children waited for him. The group were then seen walking away together from the beach sometime later, which the police estimated to be around 12:15 p.m. About 2.5 hours later, another witness sighted the children with the man, who was observed carrying an airline bag similar to the one that the child Jane owned. The Beaumont parents described the children, particularly the eldest Jane, as shy. For them to be playing so confidently with a stranger seemed completely out of character. Investigators theorized that the children had perhaps met the man during a previous visit or visits and had grown to trust him. A chance remark at home, which seemed insignificant at the time, supports this theory. Arna had told her mother that Jane had got a boyfriend down on the beach. Nancy thought she meant a playmate, and took no further notice until after the disappearance. A shopkeeper at nearby Wenzel's Bakery on Mosley Street reported that Jane had bought pasties and meat pie with a £1 note. Police viewed this as further evidence that the Beaumont children had been with another person for 2 reasons. The shopkeeper knew the children well from previous visits and reported that they had never purchased a meat pie before, and the children's mother had only given them 6 shillings and 6 pence, enough for their bus fare and lunch, not a £1 note. Police believe the money had been given to them by somebody else. It was said to be someone that had money to them, and we're going to get into that later. According to initial statement, the Beaumont children were seen walking alone at 2:55 p.m. away from the beach along Jetty Road, in the general direction of their home. The witness, a postman who knew the children well, and his statement was regarded as reliable, said the children were holding hands and laughing in the main street. Police could not determine why the reliable children, already 1 hour late, were strolling alone and seemingly unconcerned. The postman contacted police 2 days after his initial statement, said that he thought he saw them in the morning, not the afternoon as he had previously said. Several months later, a woman reported that on the night of the disappearance, a man, accompanied by 2 girls and a boy, entered a neighboring house that she had believed empty. Later, the woman said she had seen the boy walking alone along a lane where he was pursued and roughly caught by a man. The next morning, the house appeared to be deserted again, and she saw neither the man nor the children. Police could not establish why she failed to provide this information earlier. Other reported sightings of the children continued for about a year after their disappearance. Now, this is about to get a lot worse, so prepare yourselves. Okay? The Beaumont case attracted international attention. On November 8th, 1966, Gerard Croiset, a Dutch psychic, was brought to Australia to assist in the search, which caused a furor in the press. Croiset's efforts proved unsuccessful, with his story changing day to day and offering no clues. He identified a spot at a warehouse near the children's home in which he believed their bodies had been buried, inside the remains of an old brick kiln. The property owners, who were reluctant to excavate based on a psychic claim, soon bowed to public pressure after publicly raising £400,000, or Australian dollars, I should say, to have the building demolished. No remains nor any evidence tied to any members of the Beaumont family were ever found there. In 1996, the building identified by Croiset was undergoing partial demolition, and the owners allowed a full search of the site. Once again, no trace was found of the children. About 2 years after their disappearance, the Beaumont parents received 2 letters. One was supposedly written by Jane, and another by a man who said he was keeping the children. The envelope showed a postmark of Dandenong, Victoria. The brief notes described a relatively pleasant existence and referred to the man who was keeping them. Police believed at the time that the letters could quite likely have been authentic after comparing them with other notes written by Jane. The letter from the quote-unquote man said that he had appointed himself guardian of the children and was willing to hand them back to their parents. In the letter was a meeting place, and the Beaumont parents, with the detective, drove to the designated place, but nobody appeared. Sometime later, a third letter arrived, also purported to be from Jane, stated that the man had realized a disguised detective was present and that he decided to keep the children because the Beaumonts had betrayed his trust. There were no further letters. In 1992, the forensic examinations of the letters showed they were a hoax. Fingerprint technology had improved, and the author is identified as a 41-year-old man who had been a teenager at the time, had written the letters as a joke. Because of the time that had elapsed, he was not charged with any offense. We're going to quickly go over possible suspects of this. Bevan Spencer von Einem, who was born in 1946, was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1984 for murdering Richard Kelvin, the teenage son of Adelaide newsreader Rob Kelvin. The police and prosecutors publicly stated that they believe Von Einem had accomplices and was possibly involved in additional murders. During the investigation into Von Einem, police heard from an informant identified only as Mr. B. He related an alleged conversation in which Von Einem boasted of having taken 3 children from a beach several years earlier, and said he had taken them home to conduct experiments. According to Mr. B's account, Von Einem claimed to have performed brilliant surgery on each of the children, and he had connected them up. One of the children had supposedly died during the procedure, and so he had killed the other 2 and dumped the bodies in a bushland south of Adelaide. They had not previously considered him as a suspect. As of 2014, he had been ruled out as a suspect as the facts were not lined up correctly. Arthur Stanley Brown was charged in 1998 with the murders of sister Judith and Susan McKay in Townsville, Queensland. They disappeared on their way to school on August 26, 1970. They were found strangled several days later in a dry creek bed. His trial, scheduled for July 2000, was delayed after his lawyer applied for a section of 613 verdict, unfit to be tried, from the jury. He was never tried, and a search for a connection to the Beaumont children was unsuccessful, as no employment records existed that could shed light on Brown's movements at the time. Some of the records were believed to be lost in the Brisbane flood of 1974. There is no proof that he ever visited Adelaide. A witness recalled having a conversation with Brown in which he mentioned having seen the Adelaide Festival Centre. Nearing completion, which would place him in the city shortly before the abduction of the Oval abduction in 1973. No evidence has been found to connect Brown with Adelaide in the year 1966. So he does not match the description as the man seen with the children, so he is no longer a person of interest. James Ryan O'Neill was sentenced to life imprisonment for the 1975 murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania. It is reported to have previously told several acquaintances that he was responsible for the Beaumont disappearance. In 2006, O'Neill lost an injunction in the High Court of Australia to stop the broadcast of an ABC documentary, The Fisherman, which attempted to link him to the case. Former Victorian detective Gordon Davies spent 3 years speaking to O'Neill to win his confidence before filming him for The Fisherman. Davies said that although there was no evidence to link O'Neill to the Beaumont case, he was persuaded that O'Neill was to blame. I asked him about the Beaumonts, and he said I couldn't have done it. I was in Melbourne at the time. That is not a denial. Later, asked again if he had murdered the children, O'Neill replied, "Look, on legal advice, I'm not going to say where I was or when I was there." Although O'Neill claims never to have visited Adelaide, his work in the opal industry at the time required that he frequently visited Coober Pedy, which is a known town in southern Australia, about 526 miles or 846 kilometers north of Adelaide, which would have required him to pass through the city. Davy also suspected O'Neill was involved in the Oval case. They discounted O'Neill, as a suspect in the Beaumont case. Derek Ernest Percy, a convicted child murderer and Victoria's then longest-serving prisoner, was suggested in a 2007 article in Melbourne's The Age newspaper as a suspect in the Beaumont case. The Age alleged that the evidence gathered by cold case investigators pointed to Percy in a number of unsolved child murders, including the Beaumont case. His insanity plea in 1969 murder of Yvonne Toy was at least partly based on his suffering a psychological condition that could prevent him from remembering details of his actions. On August 30, 2007, Victoria Police successfully applied for permission to question him in relation to the case of the Beaumonts. In 1966, Percy was 17 years old and therefore seems too young to have been unidentified suspect seen with the children. So basically, he could not have been a suspect of the Beaumont case or the Adelaide Oval abductions, which again, I will go over the Oval abductions in the future. And Percy died in 2013. Alan Anthony Munro, who had himself been investigated by police and cleared of involvement in the Beaumont case, gave a second-hand account to the Adelaide Advertiser that a man he had known in 1966, who by 2015 was being sought in Southeast Asia in connection with child abuse incidents, had come to his home with the children's bodies in the boot of his car. McIntyre's children said that they and their father initially mistook Arna's body for that of a boy because her hair was cut short. The man in question was later identified as businessman Alan Anthony Munro, a former scoutmaster, who had pled guilty to 10 child sex offenses dating back to 1962. Munro was sentenced to 10 years imprisonment with a non-parole period of 5 years and 5 months, making him eligible for release in 2022. In 2017, Adelaide police detectives were given a copy of a child's diary written in 1966, which allegedly placed Munro in the vicinity of Glenelg Beach at the time of the disappearance. He was convicted of abusing children, including one of McIntyre's sons, who was a contributor to the diary. No evidence had been found that he was involved in the Beaumont case. Harry Phipps, a local factory owner and then member of Adelaide's social elite, came to attention as a possible suspect after the publication of the book The Satin Man, Uncovering the Mystery of the Missing Beaumont Children in 2013. The book did not name the identity of the Satin Man, but Phipps' estranged son Hayden named him soon after the book's publication. Phipps bore a substantial likeness to the identity of a man seen talking to the Beaumont children at Glenelg Beach. He was wealthy, known to be the habit of giving out £1 notes, was later alleged to have been a child predator, and lived only 300 meters away from the beach on the corner of Augusta Street and Sussex Street. Hayden, who was 15 at the time of the disappearance, came forward to researchers in 2007 with the claim that he had seen the children in his father's yard on January 26. Two other persons, who were youth at the time, said that they had been paid by Phipps to dig a 2 by 1 by 2 meter hole in his factory yard that weekend for unstated reasons. Now, people are actually saying that he is actually the one that did it, that he took the children, and there's a whole video and documentary about it. In November 2013, a 1 meter square section of a factory in North Plimpton, who had been owned by Phipps, was excavated. A ground-penetrating radar found one small anomaly, which can indicate movement or objects within the soil, but the dig found no additional evidence of the site, and it was closed. On January 22, 2018, Adelaide detectives announced that they would return to the factory site and conduct further excavations after a private investigator sponsored by Channel 7 in Adelaide. The excavation on February 2nd, 2018 took 9 hours. Animal bones and general rubbish were found, but nothing related to the case. In February of 2025, based on new evidence, South Australian MP Frank Pangallo organized a third privately funded excavation at a site. The week-long search did not find any remains of the children. Now, I am going to say this. They are still looking into this case. This case has never been let go. It is something that shook Australia to the core. And they are really, truly believing, especially with Hayden Phipps's, coming forward. He claims his father committed these terrible acts. So Mr. Phipps, is deemed the only person that could have done it as of this moment. They cannot prove it, but what I have actually done research on even more is that while they are looking through, they have been searching the wrong area of his old factory. So now they're going to change where they're searching, and we're hoping that after they change where they were searching and they go to a new area based on the 1966 area time frame, that they will be able to find answers. Now, unfortunately, there will not be any bodies as of this point. There would not even really be any bones left. It's going to be really nothing, but they should be able to find traces, hopefully, of some sort of DNA from those children in the ground. Unfortunately, getting to the parents, their parents got divorced because, this was a horrible case, and they could not handle this being together anymore, so they divorced, having resolved to live their final years away from the public attention that followed them for decades. They sold their home, and they remained informed of the couple's new addresses, which the police did, as the case remains open. The Beaumonts are reported to have accepted that the truth of the children's disappearances may never be discovered. And unfortunately, they both have died. Nancy died in an Adelaide nursing home on September 16, 2019, at the age of 92. Get this. Jim, the dad, also died in Adelaide on April 9, 2023, at age 97. He lived to be 97 years old. That is remarkable that they lived to be in their 90s, both parents. I'm mentioning this story because, like I said, recently I was watching a little documentary about this, and I wanted to share the story. Second of all, I wanted to bring this to light to know that they are not giving up trying to find these kids. They're probably deceased. Like the guy's kids said that they were deceased, that the dad shot them. And that's how the kids died, at least in the documentary I watched. That's what Hayden said, that his dad shot the kids. He shot the gun 4 times. Then he paid off those kids, other kids, to dig the hole. the 2 by 1 by 2 meter hole in the factory yard over the weekend when no one was there, but he never stated what reason. I hope that we can finally put this case in the closed section and we can finally get answers. I would love for them to be alive, but unfortunately, I don't think they're going to be. I think we're going to find evidence that they were buried somewhere. Let me know what you think of this, and if you've ever heard of this story before, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!